right, well, welcome to the show. I'm Scott, Scott Horton, that is, scotthorton.org and libertarianinstitute.org, etc. And he is Daryl Cooper, Martyrmade podcast at martyrmade.com and at substack.com/martyrmade, right?
Subscribe.martyrmade.com. They tell me that gets around Elon's, throttling. I don't know if it's true, but
yeah, mine is scotthortonshow.com is my Substack. So
they tell me it's more professional that way. So
yes, it looks much better. That used to be my website URL before I got scotthorton.org. So now I'm using it again. Anyway, so hey, if you are a Daryl Cooper Substack subscriber, then you ought to subscribe to my Substack too. That's what we all agree.
Yeah,
on.
you should just kick over to Scott's actually, because as I'm finishing up this next episode of the History Podcast, I've been neglecting the hell out of you guys, and so I apologize for that. But if you want to kick over to Scott, at least until I'm done, you should do so.
That's true. I got at least a couple of interviews every week I'm putting up there now. And sometimes when I remember interviews of me. So, let's start about talking about that verse, man. What is this podcast that you're doing, and how close are you to dropping that official first chapter of it?
I'm in the final writing phase now. So I think, my goal is to get this done by the first week of September. And
okay, great.
Whenever I set myself deadlines like that, all I'm doing is, preparing myself for public embarrassment. But I'm gonna say it here. I think I can get it done. You were talking about some of the projects you've got on the burners right now that is just kind of forcing you to just push everything else aside and just buckle down and focus. And that's kind of the mode I'm in now. Like, other than this podcast, honestly, like, I barely get out of my chair with my laptop and my books. Like, it's just all I've been doing. And I'm sort of really, really just focused on that until I'm going to be until it's finished. Like, yeah. I have this thing, and you're probably the same way, actually, knowing what I know about you, that like, I'm either obsessive or I'm kind of just doing other things. Like, I really am not one of those dudes who can just sort of like, I'll put aside like 2 hours in the morning and then like 4 hours in the afternoon and kind of get this done bit by bit. I don't know why. I just can't work like that. Like, I have to push everything aside and just get laser focused and kind of let it become my whole world for a while. And that's the mode I'm in now. So,
yeah. Well, that is how I am, except I don't ever turn that off. I don't have the periods of screwing around either. Very occasionally, I'll hold a gun to my own head and force myself to go skate with the boys, like every few months or something. Possibly take the boat out or something, but actually not. I'll go months at a time without ever doing anything but work because I just got too much to do. I take on huge projects at a time that are just, I'm completely ridiculous for doing so, but I can't help it because I keep thinking of things. So I'm almost done. Speaking of which, I'm working on the Academy, the Scott Horton Academy of Foreign Policy and Freedom. And that's like Tom Wood's Liberty Classroom, only it's me. And it's at scotthortonacademy.com to sign up if people want to get on the email list to find out first and watch the little promo video we got there. It'll definitely be next month. It's definitely not going to be this month, but it'll definitely be next month that we're going to go ahead and launch the thing. And it's me doing gigantic courses. I forget how long, but many tens of hours on the Middle East and the Cold War with Russia, the new one. And then it's the great James Bovard on 40 years of investigative journalism on everything in the world, from stealing documents from the World Bank to the Waco massacre and everything else. And the guy's just the most accomplished and most important libertarian journalist ever, Jim Bovard, from the Institute and also from the New York Post, of course. And then we got William Bupert on how America lost every war since 1945, and C.J. Kilmer on how Woodrow Wilson was the worst person who ever lived. And then we've got this preacher, I forgot his name. He's not a preacher, he's a scholar, a Lutheran religious scholar, is going to be debunking Christian Zionism and dispensationalist, premillennialist.
Hold on, I have to jump in real quick, man.
Follery. Yes, sir.
Everybody knows that Winston Churchill is the worst person that ever lived. Come on.
You're in so much trouble, dude. Oh my God. He helped sink the Lusitania. It's true. Colin Simpson wrote that book.
I'm stoked about this project because, I've always actually, going back years, even before you and I were like really buds, I would listen to your work, and something like this is going to be just 10 times better for it when, something jumps off, I'm like a lot of people who are like educated laymen on given issues like around the world, right? Where I read a few books. I read all the Shah's Men. I read, a handful of books, the Twilight Wars, etc., about Iran, right? So when the Iran thing jumps off, you think I have all this sort of knowledge just sitting there about everything that's going on, but really what it is like I read those books, and unless I'm doing a podcast on it or something, like I come away with it where I remember the vibe of the book, and I remember like sort of the general themes and lessons that I took from it. But then the details just kind of fade out of my memory over time. And so later on, like I'll have the same feeling about the situation that I gained from that book or those books, but the details are all gone. And so when something jumps off, I would always go back and just revisit some of your interviews and your stuff just to kind of get myself back up to speed. It's super useful for that. And if you're doing like 10-hour courses and stuff, it's going to be great.
Yeah. I guess I'm reminded of something from junior college. I took a speech class, and I wouldn't be able to tell you the percentages, but he showed on the board where you remember this, on average, whatever, through the studies, you remember this percentage of what you hear. You remember this percentage of what you see. Remember this percentage of what like somebody explains to you. Remember this percentage of what you read. You remember this percentage of what you teach somebody else, right? And that's, of course, the highest score. And that's, of course, my job is I read Gareth Porter and I go, oh my God, did you guys see Gareth Porter today? Well, here's what he figured out. Knew it all along, didn't you? And we go through it. And so I get, to reinforce my own head. And then, of course, my job is interviewing everybody who writes all of the stuff that I like to read. So then I get to ask them all the follow-up questions that I want and all those things. So when I read one of those books, I then spend an hour with the guy that wrote it, and I get to go, so at that one part where you wrote about this, well, what about the other thing there? And then, so I'm like getting a chance to develop. First, I learned this, but now I want to learn a little bit more based from that. And so that gives me a better chance to really retain something or another from each little thing,
It's so true. And it actually doesn't even just increase retention. It actually helps you develop your own and refine your own thinking.
Yeah.
Like I notice in my jujitsu classes, for example, like I'm just a middle belt, but every once I'm high enough that if the coach is sick or something and he can't come in that day, I can teach the white belts their arm bars and their basic stuff. And you would think that that's just kind of going through the motions for somebody who's been doing it for many years, like I am. But that's not the case. Like even having to show them even the most basic stuff makes you realize like, oh, you know what? I'm actually kind of sloppy about this. So but I can't be now because I'm teaching it. So I have to clean that up, and it helps a lot. I mean, and the version of that in like daily life is, my wife will ask me a question about something going on in the world that's in the news. And for 5 minutes or so, I get possessed by the ghost of Scott Horton. I just sort of like speak words that I've heard you say before. But then eventually, like after doing that enough times, like those become my words, and I can sort of say them, in my own vernacular and with my own added parts to it. So yeah.
Yeah. Fun.
So what else are you working on? You're working on a book.
Love that stuff, yeah. So now once the academy's done, I will finish the audiobook. I had to put that on hold because essentially Tom Woods has brought this new opportunity to me on a silver platter to do. And so, help to make it happen. So I have to do this. I have all these other guys as part of the academy with me and everything. And so this has got to be my top priority. And then as soon as I got that in the bag and out there, I'll, of course, got to do everything I can to promote it. And then I got to knock out the end of the audiobook. I'm still not done with the audiobook of Provoked. I've finished all of Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton, which is 3 sections on my Substack there, scotthortonshow.com. And it's like, I forgot if it's 9 or 12 hours. It's longer than the audiobook of Enough Already. It's just the first 2 chapters of the audiobook of Provoked. So I still have quite a lot to do there, except, man, once I'm done with this academy thing, I'm just so determined to knock the audiobook out that I am going to, if I just got to get myself a drug habit and stay up for 72 hours, I'm going to finish that damn thing. I mean,
because after that, your schedule's clear. You're all done, right? You just get to hang out and enjoy the sunset. Right. No.
And then I got to relaunch more again, the Scott Horton Show interview show, which I have been back to doing at least 2 interviews a week lately, including some real good ones. I talked with Matt Taibbi last week.
Yeah, I listened to that. It was good.
God, who else? Somebody good whose name was escaping me off my memory. Um, but so I've been doing a bunch of that, and but I gotta make that a YouTube show like this is, once I can finally get my act together and get that going. And then it looks like I'm gonna write another book. My idea originally was, oh, I know what I'll do. And I kind of got like excited and out ahead of myself, I guess, a little bit. And so I texted Tucker Carlson and I was like, hey, man, you and me should write a book together. And we'll just outline it. And then I'll do the hard part. I'll write the thing. And then we'll just put your name on it with Scott Horton at the bottom. I don't care, and like put that thing out. And then he like kind of didn't answer. And then he was like, I'm real busy. Okay, what the hell? I'm way out over my skis here. Okay, never mind me. But then I thought, you know what? I already outlined the thing. And I already know exactly what I want the book to be. So hell.
What is it?
So it's going to be America First, the right's turn to peace. And it's going to be about how screwed up everything is and why it's all the war's fault and the empire's fault, and how that's step one in setting America right again is giving up on the neocon dream of global hegemony and being a normal country in a normal time. Like even Gene Kirkpatrick said we could be back in 1990. And so that's going to be the thrust of the thing. And it already writes itself. I just, I jotted down the outline in 5 minutes, which is sort of like the other books too. Like they're already basically fully conceived in my brain. I just got to do this slog. But I got myself a good co-author, Hunter Durensis, from the Institute, is going to write it with me. And he's a great expert and historian on the old right too, and knows all about the old anti-war right before the neocons came and ruined everything. And so he's going to be a good partner to have on this one. And I think he's already like raring to go and pretty excited about it too. So
what do you think? I mean,
if
you had to sort of elevator pitch like the right wing critique of the empire and like the right wing anti-war position, and I ask that just because, I mean, it's kind of crazy since anti-war position was really like it was the conservative right wing position for a long time,
Mhm.
but it's been sort of it's been out of the Republican Party and out of the right for so long that I think a lot of people have trouble even articulating the right wing anti-war position. So I mean, what is it you see developing?
Republic, not empire. It's as simple as that. You cannot have George Washington's Constitution and a world empire. And just look at us. Imagine somehow having a global empire centralized in Washington, D.C., but not having a domestic empire centralized in Washington, D.C. It's impossible, right? And, a huge part of it is just having a government powerful enough to force us to pay to fund the thing. And so we just, and you look at the debt, they just officially crossed $37 trillion. It's I think it was Brian McGlinchey that just wrote this great piece at Stark Realities about 37 trillion. That's nothing compared to all the other unfunded liabilities of the national government and all this. It's like over $100 trillion, just whatever it was. I'm sorry. Don't quote me on that part, but it was at least very high tens of trillions. And just this country's completely bankrupt. The stewards of American power have run this country into the ground. The empire costs as much or more as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid every year. And all three of those are now outpaced by spending on interest on the national debt.
I mean, that's kind of the Rubicon, isn't it? I mean,
it is absolutely just insane. You look at that line chart and somebody's got to call a halt to the thing. And then even worse than this, and it's kind of invisible until you are shown it once, and then you'll always see it for the rest of your life. That boom bust cycle in the economy that you've always lived with. Every 10 years, all of a sudden everybody stops spending money and everything sucks, and the average guy doesn't know why, right? We've all lived through that over and over again, our whole lifetimes long. And the reason why, there's only one answer for this, and there's only one group of people who know the answer and are right about this, and everybody else is stupid and wrong. I'm sorry. It's just true, okay? It's the Austrian school economists. Ludwig von Mises, particularly, back 100 years ago, wrote The Theory of Money and Credit. And what it's about is how what they call the business cycle, where we have this boom and bust, is not caused by business. It's not caused by free markets. It's not caused by mistakes and bad investments because freedom is stupid and messy and unworkable. It's because the government, communist commissars, control the currency. 1/2 of every transaction is the government money. And of course, the government has essentially, I mean this very loosely, a conspiracy of interest with the banks who are members of the Federal Reserve System with the government, where the banks promise to always buy government debt. And then the government licenses the banks to print money out of nothing and to make new loans of new credit and bank credit expansion into the economy. And so you always have, in the boom times, the government and the banks working together to create way more new money than there is new wealth to be represented by it, which leads, just think of it this way. The government is holding down interest rates by pouring in new money or by just literally holding them down. Then if you are an entrepreneur, that interest rate signals to you that there are X amount of resources of capital investments saved up for you to borrow and invest in your business, right? But in a free market, that interest rate would fluctuate freely, and you would know, it would be an accurate signal of just how much, whether maybe now you should be saving because you'll be collecting on that high interest rate rather than maybe you should be borrowing. But when they hold the interest rate artificially low, now you, the businessman, take out loans that you otherwise would not, because you're being misled into thinking that there are more available resources for investment than there actually are. And so this is what Mises called the cluster of errors. You can have a bad businessman make a bad bet. You could have a thunderstorm destroy the orange crop. You could have all kinds of things happen. But what causes a whole nation of businessmen to all make a bunch of stupid bad bets in the same direction at the same time? Government intervention in the monetary system. That's the answer. Artificial bank credit expansion. Read What Has Government Done to Our Money and the Case Against the Fed by Murray N. Rothbard. It's chapter 14. It's chapter 11 of For a New Liberty by Murray Rothbard. Just explains this so perfectly. And so this is why you think about what they call the good times. You think about all the times in your life, Daryl, that you watched on TV and they were going, man, it's great economic times now. Stock market's roaring. Everybody's happy. And you're going, oh my God, are you kidding? Prices of everything are up. Cost of living is up. Price of rent is up. Price of groceries is up. Price of fuel is up. Think of the Bush years, for example, where you didn't have widespread price inflation on everything, but on your basic cost of living, energy, food, and housing, right? And they go, oh, this is the good times. This is the boom times. And you're getting completely screwed unless you're the guy who is, selling these things that are being artificially boosted, right? Otherwise, it's at the expense of everybody else. And then what happens? The correction, which is what? The absolute catastrophe, right? The Great Recession, the massive correction where all the bad loans are either called in or marked off. And all of the marginal businesses that never should have been invested in, and only were invested in because of the artificially low interest rates, sending those false economic signals to entrepreneurs, all those businesses wiped out. I saw a line chart today where the wealth of the bottom 50% of the population of the country went from 1.5 trillion to like 275 billion in the crash of 08 and 09, right? That's the correction from the artificial fake prosperity of the inflationary boom times. And then they do it to us again and again. And last sentence here. And all of this is to make big government seem cheap, right? If they just raised your taxes, you'd call a halt or at some point revolt. So they tax what they can, and then they borrow more, and then they print the rest. And so then when you're sitting in the unemployment line staring at your shoes, wasting time, unable to provide for your people, that's your cost of killing all those Yemenis. That's you later paying the price in your wasted life for the sins that the government previously committed on your credit card. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I try to get
cycle, man.
I try to get like left-wing people interested in the Federal Reserve, and it's really hard to do. But when one of the hooks that I have that works occasionally is to point out to them that this boom bust cycle you're talking about, just leads to like more and more consolidation of capital, which is like the left
Mhm.
wing boogeyman, right?
Mhm.
Because who can ride out the busts? It's, the same companies that rode out COVID, like the companies that, all of your mom and pop restaurants got closed. And now there's more Applebee's on every corner than
Right.
there ever were before. And
Yep.
that's the whole economy. And then you just think about how, the interest rates being artificially low. It just, how do I put it? It like skews the risk profile of the whole country
Right.
in like a very bad direction. Because, if you think of like something like CalPERS, the California pension system for the public employees, it's like $2 trillion, something insane, like, fund. And just to meet, the California pension, state employee pensions, it's not as if like the current employees pay in and that's the fund for that year that pays out the current people or anything. It's a big sovereign wealth fund that has to meet a certain mark every year in order to meet its obligations to all the people it's got to pay. It's got to make something like 7 or 8% every year. Well, when you can get 5 or 6% on a government bond or something else that's like really safe, then you can dabble in other things to make up that other 2 or 3% that you've got to make to meet your obligations. When they slam interest rates down to 2%, 1.5, 0%, they look around and they're like, we got to make 7 or 8% or 7 to 8%, or we cannot pay out the
Mhm.
pensions we owe to these people. So what's paying 7 to 8%? Well, not government bonds, not AAA rated corporate bonds, not really anything. We got to go all the way down to like, whatever, Greek sovereign debt and mortgage backed securities. And obviously, like the big one is just you have all these huge funds that used to be primarily bond funds that are just piled into the stock market because it's just the only place that you can actually make the returns you require.
Yep. And that
And
goes for everybody, right? That goes for grandma. She can't save money in a just savings account or a CD down there where inflation is gonna whoop her interest rate and just destroy her money. She's gotta make a bet somewhere, and goes for everybody.
yeah,
Forces regular Joes who have no business whatsoever betting on the stock market into the stock market.
yeah, exactly. And like, there's also and maybe, I kind of think I like to talk about this like even more broadly in terms of in the context of the book you're writing about how the empire is harming people like directly, because people can think the empire is destructive, it's bad, I don't like killing people, I don't like all these wars. But in terms of like the mechanism by which all of that rebounds back on you, and now and obviously a big part of it is the monetary part. But then I wonder too, and I don't know if you're going to cover this in the book. I would love it if you did. I've been thinking, because I've been thinking a lot about this lately. So this episode I'm working on right now, the first real episode of the World War II series, it's about the end of the First World War and the revolutions in Eastern and Central Europe that happened right afterwards. And my starting point, and I critique it a bit, but my starting point is George Mossey's brutalization thesis, where he takes this idea that you had all these guys. This was one of the first wars that you didn't have like professional armies. These weren't mercenary armies that were going out there, professional soldiers that were going and fighting in the trenches. These were just whole generations of men piling into those trenches, school teachers, office clerks, just normal people, right? And they go into the trenches and they experience this horrific situation, like just horrific beyond anybody's imagining. You gotta, like, it's all, everybody knows war is terrifying. Bullets are coming at you. You might die. Maybe you do get wounded. Maybe somebody dies. But the trenches were like this environment where you can't put your hand up above the top because it'll get shot by a sniper. And so that means that when your buddy dies, you can't go up topside and bury him somewhere. And so you bury him in the floor of the trenches. But then after a while, the floor underneath you of trenches is just all bodies, and there's nowhere to bury anybody anymore. And so your buddy for the last 4 days now is just sitting in the corner over there dead, decomposing with rats eating his face. And this is like what these normal 19-year-olds who were working in an office yesterday, like this is what they were experiencing for years. And then after that, they get done with this experience if they manage to survive, and they go back to Germany, or they go back to, whatever country they were from, if they were from one of the defeated countries, uh, and their country's in the midst of a revolution where artillery pieces are being rolled out on the streets of Berlin and blowing up people in buildings because there's communists in there, or there's, right wing militias in that one, machine gun battles on the street, people, just kids being killed. And so going through this, like, you're 18 years old in 1914, you're 22, 23 years old when the war ends. Another 2 or 3 years of just total chaos on the streets of Berlin and all the German cities, but all of Central and Eastern Europe, really. And then 1923, of course, you have the hyperinflation in Germany, and that spread a lot, like, throughout Central and Eastern Europe as well. And so you just like have these people who the first 6, 7 years of their adulthood is just total chaos. And like the idea that, like, life is something that's sacred, that we need to, like, really value and take seriously, and that it's not something that you just throw away in a cavalier manner. That's not the world these guys were introduced into, And then these guys, or the ones who were a bit younger, and sometimes they were even, like, more radical than anybody else because they felt that, like, we just missed out. If you were 17 years old when the war ended and you didn't participate, like, you probably got lucky, but then after it's over, still, you're working in an office and there's 10 guys and 8 of them were in the war and 2 you weren't. And there's a certain sense of shame and need to compensate that comes with that. But those were all the guys who were filling up the ranks of the Wehrmacht and the Waffen SS, in the Second World War. And so that's, like, a really important thing to just understand. And it's not like a way of making excuse for anybody. It's just, like, understanding, like, how this kind of world developed. And it's a long way of approaching, like, my question here is, like, obviously, like, we have these boutique specialized volunteer force armies now. Most people, like the military's really become like a caste system where you either know 20 people who are in the military, or you know nobody who's in the military, and, like, it's families. It's like your dad, 3, your uncles, your grandpa, etc. was in, or just nobody in your family is served. Like, it's really like a segregated thing. And so you have a lot of people who are totally isolated from the experience now. And even the people who are sort of in that part of society that provides the soldiers, even then, it's just our armies are so much smaller and these things are so much more contained in terms of the actual operations that there's just not that many people with direct experience. But because of the spread of media, especially just the, high definition, 4K HD, just on your phone all the time, uncut live footage if you want to see that. Like, people are still seeing all these things all the time. And they're, like, in addition to that, it's, not just the witnessing violence and things, but, there's something, I really feel like there's something corrupting to our souls, corrosive to our spirits as individuals and as a society, of living in a society, living at a time when you're at war, and it's something that, like, almost like when a war starts, you're kind of on a countdown, because, like, from that point when it starts, your soul starts getting eaten away a little bit, and if it goes on for too long, then you start having real consequences to that. And this is something that we recognize even in the force. Like, we have, there were a lot of disciplinary problems that were coming up in the SEAL teams, for example. In the first 10 years of the Iraq War, very, very, very few, like, very well behaved for the most part. And, given the situation, but, like, we started to see more and more disciplinary things, including things in the field that were happening.
Hey, there's a
And one
new
of
book
the
out real quick. There's a new book out about Delta at Fort Bragg and their litany of murders and drug dealing and crime and prostitution.
one of the things that they sort of came, like, a conclusion they came to about all that is, like, these guys have just been at war for too long. Like, you can send people out to, on a few tours to do something, but then you got to take them off the line, man, and, like, get them out of that mentality and, like, bring them back into the fold of regular society. And like, I think I may have mentioned this in a previous episode, and I'll cut it over to you after this, but I feel like, I think back to when Abu Ghraib was publicized in '04, and how, you had your people, just like people defended Lieutenant Calley. There were those people out there who, tried to downplay it. But for the most part, people saw those pictures and they were like, what the hell are we doing? Like, this
Right.
is crazy. And it wasn't just, what are we doing to these people? It was, what are we doing to our people? You know, because these are just a bunch of National Guard kids from like Maryland or something like that, who like, and now we send them over there into this environment and this is what they're doing. What are we doing to our own people? And I worry, and I think, like, you know, that if something like that were to happen today, and maybe it is happening. I mean, it's happening 10 times worse in Gaza. People see it every
Yeah.
day, and people, they feel, they feel nothing, you know, compared to, I mean, not everybody, obviously, but like the level of outrage and horror that, you know, you should feel at the idea that our weapons are enforcing a blockade that's leading to that child starving that you're looking at in a picture right now, and that we're doing something to contribute to that. It should horrify people, and it just doesn't. You know,
Yeah.
eventually people get inured to all that.
It is. It's just your basic desensitization, is same as anything. I still remember the first time I saw Grand Theft Auto, which was in like what, '06 or something, and the guy kills a hooker and then he tracks her blood across the street. And I remember going, "Whoa, man. Oh my God. Now that's crossing a line in a video game that I just hadn't thought of that. You know, I don't know. What the hell? It's just R-rated. It ain't that bad, but I was a little shocked. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
guess that makes me an old fuddy-duddy, right? But of course, that's nothing now. Like, whatever. That was just, you know, at very first blush there kind of thing. But then, yeah, I mean, look at what it took for them to lie us into Iraq. And then by 2011, Obama was like, Libya, some lie, whatever. And then launched a war in Libya. Nobody even cared. Um,
Dude, that's so true. I heard somebody the other day in another podcast talking about, and I get their point, but like they were talking about how the Iraq war, like today, like now that the internet is the way it is and everybody's on social media and there's some open forums for information to get out there and everything, that they couldn't pull that off today. And my response to it is they wouldn't have to pull it off today.
Yeah, they just walk right
Just
in
like
there.
they don't even
Look what they did
bother
with
lying
Iran.
to us anymore, you know?
Yeah. They called out Trump. They go, "Look, man, your director of national intelligence is not standing by your claims that Iran is making nukes." He goes, "I don't care. I'll do whatever I
Yeah.
want anyway." Okay. Thanks for letting us know. Nobody considered for a moment going to Congress and getting an authorization to go to war or any of this. Which, you know, so much the better for that one. Probably want to call that one as short as possible, although that's probably still just step one of that war. I don't want to go down that trail now if you don't want to, but that ain't over yet. And yeah, as far as, yes, okay, so on Abu Ghraib, I mean, I still remember, just because this is how my brain works, is like, I know where I was at Airport Boulevard and 290 listening to 550 AM radio, driving my cab, I guess it would have been, or maybe my little pickup truck, and listening to the absolute outrage on conservative talk radio from San Antonio about these pictures. And to quote, "This is not who we are. We insist that, no, we're better than this. This is George Washington's country, man. This is a Christian country. We don't go around torturing people. What in the world? Somebody's got to go to prison. What is the truth behind this? What in the hell is going on?" And then, Daryl, that was over by Friday. And by Friday, George Bush said, first of all, we don't torture. Second of all, yes, of course we do. And you love it. You support me. You support America. You support this war. You're a patriot. Then you must, I demand you must back me up on this. You're damn right we do enhanced interrogations to get what we need out of these terrorists to prevent them from nuking American cities. When? And the American people, the audience and the hosts on 550 AM radio in San Antonio went, all right, fine. I guess we do torture people after all. That was that week, dude. Never mind all the rest, you know?
You know, a lot of people, I find they still to this day have a total, like a big misunderstanding about what happened at Abu Ghraib. And like the real story is way worse than the one that most people think. Because what most people think is that you had this unit of psychopaths that like went off the reservation and did all this stuff that, you know, that we're all horrified by and embarrassed by, but we got rid of them and we dealt with that. And like, that, I mean, for everybody out there who doesn't know the whole story, like that's not what was going on at all. Like that National Guard unit showed up and all that stuff was already going on. And you got to remember, these are a bunch of people who've never been to war. Some of them were like, been in the Guard for a while. I think one of the main guys was prior service, but he'd never seen combat. Most of them were just youngsters who were in the National Guard, thought they were going to get college money, and now we're at war and you're in Iraq and they put you in this prison and you get there and the CIA's there. They got their interrogators and everything. And, there's this weird thing in the military where it's embarrassing, honestly, for those of us who are veterans, but it's true. Where like, you could have like, I swear to God, you could have like an admiral or a general, in a room. And if like a low level CIA guy walks in, they just kowtow. They're like, oh, wow. Yes, sir. Yes. Anything we can do. They treat them like they're above like everybody in the military. It's just a weird thing that I don't really understand. But you go there, you have these CIA guys and they tell you that, we're going to interrogate these guys. And I know you guys are just military police who are sent here to be guards, but part of your job is going to be conditioning these people before they are sent to us to be interrogated. And what does that mean? Well, here, let us show you. And it's all the stuff that they went to jail for. Like that's the stuff they were told to do, for the most part. I mean, like that, even that picture, that famous picture of the guy in the hood standing up with his arms spread like a scarecrow and everything, that picture, like, it's just like, I mean, it's just such a crazy thing to even think about. But the girl who took that picture, she was, part of the Guard unit who got in trouble for all this. The girl who took that picture, she walked by and that guy was standing on that crate naked in a freezing room, like shivering, his teeth were chattering. And she went and got that shroud and everything to cover him, like, and then took the picture as she was kind of taking pictures of everything that was going on. And like, so when you realize that this was not just a group of psychopaths who like lost their minds, this was a group of regular Americans that we put into an absolutely just an unforgivable situation. We put them into this situation where they get there and they've got their officers, their bosses, all these combat veterans who have been there, done that they kind of look up to, CIA interrogators, all telling them, this is what you're supposed to do. And what are they going to think? They're going to think that, well, I thought the military and war and everything was this way, but obviously I don't know what I'm talking about. This is how it is. And
you're right. But then again, Sam Prevance refused to participate and blew the whistle and told the truth and handed the stuff over to military investigators because that was what his mama taught him was right. So that just shines a very dark light on everybody else there who went along with that. I don't care what your rank is. Like, you don't know that it's not okay to tie somebody up and then beat them up.
Oh yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. I mean, I wish we would build statues of those people. Build a statue of the helicopter pilot at My Lai who like put his guns on American troops to make them stop doing what they were doing. But
in Fool's Errand, I have a better torture chapter in Fool's Errand, I guess, but in Enough Already, I tried
a torture chapter.
Yeah, I do write torture chapters sometimes. I did try to name all the whistleblowers, Ian Fishback and Sam Prevance and all those guys. I'm sorry, I can't remember them all right now, but there were a lot of people who came forward and told the truth about Bagram Prison in Afghanistan, about Guantanamo Bay, and about Abu Ghraib and what they're doing in Iraq. There's a guy named Tony Lugaranis, guy named Matthew Alexander. That was his pseudonym for Tony Camarino. He was the guy who got Zarqawi. How'd he get Zarqawi? By saying, hey, buddy, you want a cigarette? Tell you what, man, why don't you tell me where Zarqawi is? Instead of torturing it out of the guy. And that's how they got Zarqawi in 06. Anyway, it's a really ugly story. And by the way, the CIA murdered a guy named Al-Jamadi there in Abu Ghraib, and it was the CIA that strung him up. It was not the National Guard. And they hung him with his arms behind his back from the ceiling till it crushed his chest and suffocated him to death. And it was John Durham who investigated the origins of Russiagate, was the same guy who let him off.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And it's like, well.
Wait, hold that thought 1 second. Let me just say, everyone knows that Daryl Cooper is beholden to no man other than his voluntary donors at his Substack. But that is not true for me. My soul is owned by my coffee dealer, Phil Pepin, from moondozartisancoffees.com. And this is my Scott Horton Show blend. It is Ethiopian and Sumatran coffee all mixed together is why it tastes so dang good. And if you go to scotthorton.org, oh, there, more better. You go to scotthorton.org in the right-hand margin, there's a link there. Or if you just go to scotthorton.org/coffee, just type that in, scotthorton.org/coffee. You can get some of this, and then I get a little bit of a kickback and also get to drink coffee in the morning and not, man, I'm telling you, the amount of money I save on coffee. I told this guy, you want to advertise on my show? I don't want money. Just pay me in coffee, which is what he does. And I'm so very grateful and thankful. And what? I have no choice. I'm completely addicted to this substance. So everyone type in scotthorton.org/coffee and buy some. And as long as I'm doing ads, I want to reiterate from last week. I have the real live version right here. It's the latest book from the Libertarian Institute, Creative Chaos. Inside the CIA's Covert War to Topple the Syrian Government by William Van Wagenen. This guy is just the most fantastic writer and the bravest investigative journalist. He was kidnapped by Al-Qaeda over there and survived. He went camping out with the Yazidis in Afghanistan, getting the true story of how the Kurdish, the Barzani clan was back in Al-Qaeda in Iraq and ISIS and all this stuff. And man, he's just fantastic. And a huge part of the reason that my chapter on Syria and Iraq War III in Enough Already is so good is because I was able to borrow so heavily from this hero's work. And it's such an important book. I published it. I owe it to this guy. Do everything I can to boost it. Again, it's brand new out on Amazon right now. The Kindle will be out very soon. I got my other guy working on it. Creative Chaos by the great William Van Wagenen, the 17th book by the Libertarian Institute. And so, yeah, there's my shameless, no need to be shameless, but my extremely proud plugs of the day there. So now say the brilliant thing you were going to say.
Well, it's just, I guess, kind of my closing thought on that issue, because there's other things we want to talk about, is that, and I think this is a right-wing position, right? A conservative position that you can, like, a conservative can understand that, like, if we go from being a society where we're not comfortable with kids being exposed to pornography, let's say, right? But then now they are exposed to it. You can tell a right-wing person that, and they'll be cognizant of the fact that, like, we're suffering from something there. Like, we lost something, and this is not a good thing for us or our society. Like, it's just, there's just something that we lost. And similarly, like with this stuff, like a society and us as individuals, we as individuals are better when we see something like Abu Ghraib, when we see something like Gaza, and we are horrified by it, than if we're not.
Right.
It's just, you're a different kind of person. Like, once you're inured to that kind of thing, and it's not an improvement. And that's, to me, is, like, I mean, I could talk about the economic stuff and the monetary stuff all day, but to me, the real catastrophe of the global war on terror is just what it's done to us, kind of psychologically and spiritually, and how
Let
it's
me ask you
corrupted our
this,
politics, all that.
Daryl. Look, man, I mean, you're a tough guy. You're a veteran. I mean, the obvious counter argument to what you just said is like, no, we have to go kick ass, dude. We can't let people mess with us. And them radical Islams represent a danger to us. And so your job, sir, is killing them. Dude, what are you talking about? All this wimp stuff about leaving the world alone when it's so dangerous out there. And I don't say that to be like silly, but like that is the devil's argument position. That is the George W. Bush position, is all tough guys unite to go and do tough guy stuff. And so all wimps and weenies, you can stay home. But the real men have to go and do the tough job that they know needs doing. So you're telling me you don't believe in that? Because I know you used to.
Yeah, I think a lot of veterans of the war on terror don't believe in that anymore. They look back, and it's not that. I mean, you can do this even with somebody like Jocko, and don't take what I'm saying as like me telling you his position. I'm not putting words in his mouth, but just from knowing the guy well, like, even somebody like him, he's a G.I. Joe action figure, Team America dude, right? Even people like him, they look back and they say, like I had to give a folded flag to the mothers of some of my guys. And when I look back on it, I don't know what it was for. Like, I don't know why we had to go, like, what anybody got out of that. And worse, like, they're even looking back at it and saying, even if we would have won, if things would have gone the way that George Bush and Donald Rumsfeld promised us, even then, I don't really see what we're getting out of this. What did any of it do for us? Even if it all worked out, it just seems like, it's this churn. It's the mowing the lawn thing that, the Israelis talk about, where, you're almost going out and doing it. I actually heard somebody make this argument explicitly that keeping Afghanistan, keeping that war going was a good thing simply because it kept our military sharp. You have these guys, the Taliban types and the Pashtuns, who they're warriors. They want to fight. Great. We have a place we can cycle our frontline combat troops through. They can get some experience. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, it's depressing to hear, like, somebody that in general that I actually like and respect. He's a good guy, like, in general, but like to hear him say that, I wanted to bang my head against a wall,
Severe rationalizations there. It's really sad. And I
Can
agree
I
with you that, like, it absolutely has corrupted the spirit of the country. You've said this before. In a way, I'm like, man, it sounds schmaltzy and sentimental and I don't like it. But on the other hand, like, yeah, no, it really is a real ass thing that, like, the long-term history books from now are going to have us as such bastards. God, the Yemen war, nobody even knows or cares about, but man, they killed 300,000 people minimum you talk about nothing. And that war's as sinful as Iraq War II in every way. And what's going on in Gaza now? You got upset as hell about Trump bombing Iran for a minute, but he's been Joe Biden helping Netanyahu slaughter these poor Palestinians day in and day out for months now, deliberately starving them. They asked Trump about it. He goes, yeah, I think he should finish the job, dude. He's as bad as he can be on it. And it'll be a miracle if they're not carpet bombing Ramallah and Jenin. I mean, they've already killed 10,000 people in Jenin or something, whatever it was, thousands. It'll be a miracle if they're not just carpet bombing the population centers of the West Bank and ethnically cleansing them exact same way they're doing to Gaza now by the end of Trump's term. And
doesn't it feel a little bit
it's like, oh, well, whatever. I mean, we inherited that from Biden. It's just this thing that's going on. And you know how those Israelis are. And like, I don't know. I mean, I shouldn't say that. People are getting more and more outraged about it. But there is, like, I know you can relate. There's a feeling of helplessness here too, where we know that Trump doesn't care what we think about this. He's going to do whatever they say.
It almost feels like, thinking about Netanyahu recently saying that the next phase now is that the IDF's going to move in and take the remainder of Gaza and occupy the rest of it. And, it almost seems like, if you look at polls, right, of just Americans' opinions of Israel, like the change over the last 2 years has just been unbelievable. Like, I never would have predicted it. Even if you would have told me all of the terrible things that were going to happen in Gaza, I wouldn't have believed it would be like this, where, you have even Republicans under 50, I mean, are a majority like critical of Israel now rather than favorable. That I think, it almost seems like they're looking at these numbers and realizing that this American evangelical Christianity, Ted Cruz, like, Jesus wants us to send bombs to Netanyahu to kill Palestinians, like that's something that is like a boomer, 65 and older kind of fading out. And if you look at, like, the younger you go, the further away from that you get. And it's almost like they're seeing that and they're like, guys, we got like 10 years to finish this. We got to get rid of these people, finish this job, build our greater Israel now. And look, yeah, okay, they'll complain, they'll hate us. In 10 years, we'll make it up to them. We'll after Netanyahu's dead, we'll have a bunch of think pieces about how, he really was kind of a tyrant, just like they have Bill Clinton. Now that they want to go after Trump or whatever for like, any of the like sexual assault allegations. Of course, now they have to be like, yeah, Bill Clinton probably did rape when he was rape, right, guys? And they'll have those kind of things and try to. And that it really does look like they're just sort of sprinting for the finish line right now.
Yeah. By the way, I want to mention, and for the audience who maybe aren't familiar, especially like, obviously my people know, but for your folk who may be unfamiliar, read antiwar.com every day, man. And hell, the Libertarian Institute, don't let me sell my own first thing short. The great Kyle Anzalone and all of our great writers at the Institute are doing such great work on this. We just published a great one by Jeremy Hammond the other day. But, Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com is on top of this news, and it's in the top headlines every single day, how many people they kill over there. And I used to say it was like Waco every day, but it's really, about a Waco and a half or more every day. It's about 120 something. It seems to be about the average. I'm not keeping that close a track, but it seems to be more than 100 Palestinians slaughtered every single day, day in, day out. And again, this is an Indian reservation. This is a ghetto within Israel. I don't care what you call it. They annexed this territory back in 1967. And so this is the equivalent of bombing an Indian reservation out in Arizona or bombing a black ghetto in Baltimore or in Chicago or something like that, and just slaughtering people by the high tens of thousands in this way. And I urge people, really, if you're not that familiar, go and just look at X, put Gaza and in your X search and just look at the images coming out of there and the video coming out of there. You will identify very quickly the level of cruelty that is being inflicted upon these people. It is really bad, and it is on us. This is the Joe Biden Netanyahu war, the Donald Trump Netanyahu war, the U.S.-Israeli war against, you can't call it a war at all. As Bill Hicks said, a war is when two armies are fighting. It's just a canned hunt. It's a turkey shoot, man. Fish in a barrel, just a deliberate ethnic cleansing campaign, a genocidal campaign against the women and children and the civilian population of the Strip. In May, Netanyahu himself, not just his advisors, but Netanyahu himself said in May, we have destroyed all their homes, so they have no home to come back to, so that now they can choose to voluntarily emigrate. And that's it. The headlines are constantly, if we can't ship them to Somalia, we'll ship them to Libya. If we can't ship them to Libya, we'll ship them to Indonesia. We can't ship them to Indonesia. The new one this week was maybe we can send them to South Sudan, where the CIA broke South Sudan off from Sudan. That was on Wesley Clark's list, after all, remember? The neocons list that Clark told us about, I mean to say, but the famous Clark list. And so maybe we'll move them there. They are openly declaring their genocidal intent on a regular basis. In fact, I have one right here. Which is Bezalel Smotrich in the Times of Israel. There's a right-wing paper in Israel. Smotrich says he'll okay 3,000 more homes east of Jerusalem, quote, burying the idea of a Palestinian state forever. And which, of course, that ship sailed a hell of a long time ago. But they keep reiterating that. This is the same guy, Smotrich, who before October the 7th was the one, and I got my Israeli-American friend translated the Hebrew for me, custom order, as well as you can read the subtitles. And the video is still on X of Bezalel Smotrich saying, in this game of delegitimization, Hamas is an asset and the Palestinian Authority is a liability. See, because it's all about trying to paint the Palestinians as terrorists to the international community and to the liberals in Tel Aviv. And so as long as we can say, oh, look, Hamas, then Hamas is an asset. That's why we want to keep them there, right? So call it Obama-style treason, right, against their own people. But as Netanyahu put it repeatedly, and again, we have him on tape now, so they can't deny it anymore, we control the height of the flame. Yeah, we deliberately, not the Palestinian people have elected Hamas. Likud has foisted Hamas on the Palestinian people. And yes, you're right, they are dangerous terrorists, but don't worry. We control the height of the flame. We know what we're doing. But we need our no one to talk to certificate to show the U.S. Congress, to show the Europeans, to show the Tel Aviv liberals. You don't expect us to negotiate with these people, do you? It's the most cynical plan in the world, and they openly admit it and brag and boast about it. It's as simple as that. You want to talk about material support for terrorism? You want to talk about who's responsible for Hamas? It's literally the Prime Minister of Israel and his men are more responsible by far for Hamas's so-called rule, subcontract rule in the Gaza Strip than any Palestinian, as far as choosing them to have power over the civilian population there. And
did you hear?
They bragged about it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is you can go back, if you go read up on, go ask Grok or just look up on Google what is the what are the pieces of evidence that people use to attribute the deliberate intent of genocide to the Germans during the Second World War, for example? And like you look at it, and there's a few things that are like, you have to sort of, you have like the Wannsee conference with some second and third level officials who said, and it's notes of that somebody took and then somebody else transcribed of this conference, that somebody there said this is what Hitler wants. In other words, and this is not a way to try to delegitimize any of that. It's just a way to say, like, they have to go look. They really have to like dig through archives to find little things where there's inferences. And same thing with the Turks during the Armenian genocide. There's a fair amount there. I mean, there's some pretty incriminating statements, but like to go find like just these there's not like the flood of government officials who are coming out and just announcing their intent to do what they're doing. They're trying to hide it and all that. And that's true for virtually all of the genocides of the 20th century, And in this one, I mean, it's hard to imagine any other scenario where you've got the finance minister, the defense minister, the entire cabinet of a government just openly announcing their plans and as they're doing it, and to have people just, I mean, still kind of just want to deny it, want to make excuses for it or rationalize it. It's dumbfounding, honestly. Like, yeah, it's depressing. It's depressing.
Yeah. It's funny because, and I understand all the incentives that people have to think the way they think, and how hard it is to admit you're wrong and all that kind of thing. But then we see it all around us too, where people say, nope, I'm out. I used to believe in this, but now I just can't anymore. And like, what are they going to do? They can sit there and beat themselves up over how embarrassed they are that they had to change their mind, or they could just be good on it from now on. I try very hard. Maybe I'm not really good at this. I guess it'd be for others to judge, but I would way rather eat crow now and say, sorry, I screwed that up, and get my facts straight for tomorrow, than sit here and pretend that I didn't screw up and then keep screwing up, keep saying the same wrong thing just so I don't have to admit that I got it wrong or something. Like, nah, man, I can't live that way. And I just think, like we talked about with the Christianity thing, we're like, okay, your minister says the Bible is why we must support this sin. But if you look at another page, it says, man, you really should not be doing things like this. So like, I ain't asking you to change your religion. I'm just asking you, like, which part of your religion do you really think is apt here or like applies to this situation? You know what I mean? I think you can just, it's the kind of thing where you're like, you'd be driving your truck down the street or taking a shower or something, and it occurs to you that like, actually, that doesn't really sound right, does it? You know what I mean? Just get a little bit of different perspective, smoke a joint in your garage and kind of space out and be like, I remember thinking that, but I don't think I agree with that anymore. You know what I mean? Take a chance to shift your point of view for a minute, and you might find, like, and you know what? Who cares what your Uncle Bob thinks or what your friend Jimbo thinks or what? You can change your mind about whatever you want. And I understand. And I'm the same way too. Everybody's concerned about what other people think about what they think and blah, blah, blah. That's how it works. But so in a way, like, it's a race. Hurry up and get good on this. Or you're going to be so embarrassed to change your mind that you won't be able to. Now's your time.
I hate when I see people like Piers Morgan when he came around. And you have all these people be like, oh, welcome to the party. It's about time. Oh, now you're doing. I'm like, would you guys just shut up and like take a win for once? Welcome people like that.
Yeah, give him a beer and let everybody else know you are also welcome to change your mind. We're not going to shame you for getting it right now. Come on over.
Yeah, because you're just putting them in a very difficult situation. You have to give people an out, and just think of yourself. Like you're not right on everything all the time. There are times where like you're misinformed or you have the wrong biases at the beginning, and you have to eat that. It's just, and regardless, like the point here is to get this stopped. It's not to win the argument. It's not to like, score points on Twitter. It's to get this stopped, man. And like anybody that wants to get on the right side of that, it's just, you got to welcome those people, And I understand like, all the emotion that's tied up in it. And it's really, I mean, I get it. It's frustrating. And like, when you see people who've been propagandists for the wrong side of something that important, for them to switch sides. It does, I get it. It looks like they're sort of, now that it's getting to the point where it seems like maybe the general like social mood on the issue is starting to turn. Now they're trying to get in front. Who cares, man? Who cares? We got Piers Morgan with his giant show exposing this stuff every day. Now that is all I care about. I don't care how he got there, and yeah, I think we need to, you have to, you got to learn to think like that, man. Take a win.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so a couple things. How much time we got? We're already at an hour. So let me change the subject here real quick to a couple things before we got to go. The first one is there's a new development in the Russiagate hoax that I wanted to talk about real quick here. This is from Racket News, of course, the great Matt Taibbi, who, again, I talked to him last week. If people want to listen to that, it's at scotthortonshow.com. But this is now an email from December 22nd, 2016. It was after they've been tasked with Obama with coming up with this ICA to try to pretend that the Russians intervened because they wanted to help Trump win and all that, which was released then 7 days before Trump was inaugurated in January of 17. So here is the email from James Clapper that is to Michael Rogers, who is the head of the NSA, who's having trouble getting on board here and raising his estimate of how much to believe in this crap. And then it is also to John Brennan and Jim Comey, right? Head of NSA, head of CIA, head of FBI from the Director of National Intelligence, okay? And he says, understand your concern. Oh, he's answering Mike Rogers here, who's saying, geez, I don't know. My guys are not really committed to this stuff here. He says, understand your concern. It is essential that we, CIA, NSA, FBI, ODNI, be on the same page and are all supportive of the report in the highest tradition of that's our story and we're sticking to it. This evening, CIA has provided to the NIC the complete draft generated by the ad hoc fusion cell. We will facilitate as much mutual transparency as possible as we complete the report, but more time is not negotiable. We may have to compromise on our normal modalities since we must do this on such a compressed schedule. This one project that has to be, this is one project that has to be a team sport. In other words, these are orders directly from the DNI that NSA, enough of you and your dissents now. We are going with this thing. And of course, Mike Rogers clicked his heels like a good little National Socialist and did what he was told instead of telling the truth to the people. And we know that Trump told him, Mike Rogers, why don't you tell everybody I'm innocent? And they pretended to believe, see, that's obstruction of justice. He was trying to get the National Security Agency director to intervene and ruin the investigation. When no, he wasn't. He knew that he was innocent, and he knew that the NSA must know that. So he was saying, NSA director, can't you chime in here and tell them this isn't true? And they all, they all pretended this is the height of criminality. I'm sorry, Mr. President. We're going to have to pretend to investigate you for 2.5 more years here before we let you off the hook. And it just wouldn't be proper for the National Security Agency to say anything before all that is complete. And Trump should have had all these. Never mind. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I think back on that period, I was thinking the other day after we had our conversation about this last week, how if somebody's 20 years old, they were 11, 12 years old in 2016. And all this stuff was probably maybe just background noise. The adults were talking about it.
Hey, I got a funny anecdote.
If you're a little younger out there, you have got to understand how insane the environment was surrounding Russiagate. I mean, you had Rachel Maddow, you had every channel, every day, every show, 24/7 on the cable news channels and everything coming. And she's very solemnly looking into the camera and saying, I never thought I'd say this. I never thought that this would happen in our country. But I have to just admit to myself, and I think we have to admit as a people, that the President of the United States is working for Vladimir Putin. I mean, it was that every day, all day, and it was just taken seriously. And if you didn't if you didn't take, I mean, take like Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi should be getting a Pulitzer Prize for his work on that. He is completely vindicated for everything. He was trashed. He was blacklisted. Everything. A respected journalist. I've been reading Taibbi since the financial crisis, and he's completely right on this thing. And they try to punish him for it. And if this was a few years back, before there could be a Substack, before there could be some of these other open channels, they would have shut his ass down and closed him out. And thank God they can't do that now.
They ran him out of the Rolling Stone.
Yeah, for being completely right, And what's crazy is that, like, again, you'd think, like, in a just world, he'd be getting hired back to run like the Washington bureau of the New York Times or something. But no, he's still got to just go publish his own stuff and whatever because they're angry that he was right and they were wrong. Yeah. I remember back when all this was going on. So I was like obsessed with this story from 2016 all the way up till maybe a year after, probably like till 2019, right? So after the Mueller testimony disaster happened, and then I just started to realize that, like, oh, these people are not gonna pay for this, and I can't keep watching, so I'm gonna lose my mind. And so I was super obsessed with it, reading the blogs, listening to the podcast, and you would come across these things. And this is a lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans. I mentioned last week that, like, the people who were pushing all these lies, they really underestimated how engaged the MAGA people were with this story. They knew who Danchenko was. They knew who Mifsud was. All these, like, obscure people. They knew all those people's names. They knew the whole story behind it because of the podcasts and the blogs they were listening to. And there was, I remember coming across, when the Carter Page thing came out, and they were trying to say, well, just all the equivocations and excuse making and everything. And you mentioned last week how Carter Page was an asset of the CIA. He would go debrief the CIA every time he met with these guys. And so he gets approached by these two Russians, and, they try to get him to do something or whatever. And he immediately goes to the CIA, tells them all about it. Well, the guy at the FBI who was attacked, he was like the liaison on the Carter Page case. Yeah. Okay. The guy who signed off in March of 2016 on, like, basically closing the file on Carter Page was John Carlin, who I think was the head of the counterintelligence. He was head of counterintelligence at the FBI. And then when they wanted to run a FISA warrant to track Carter Page and everybody around him, meaning the president, meaning everybody around the president, John Carlin, the guy who knew 100% that this was all above board, he was the case officer for Carter Page, like, working all this. He signed the FISA warrant, and then he quit the FBI 2 weeks later. And it's like, when you see stuff like that, or when you see, like, when Comey was being interviewed by Brett Baier, right? Mm-hmm. And this is, like, down the line a little bit. And he asks him about, the Hillary Clinton having, I can't remember the exact detail, but something like that. The Clinton campaign paying for the Steele dossier.
Yeah.
And Comey looks at him and he goes, yeah, I'm not sure that's, I don't really have any information on that. And it's like everybody knows that now. That's public information, And now we look back on emails and everything else. He knew that, like, at the very, very beginning. And so you see that and you're like, if they're lying about something like that, it's because they know that they're wrong, And it's an incredible story. I mean, and I'm very happy that it's all come out and everything. But man, it is really hard to swallow that people are not going to get perp walk for this.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, there is a grand jury now, and I'm not going to hold my breath for seeing high-level justice and justice and CIA officials go to prison, but it could happen. And after all, if you come at the king, you better not miss. And they did, man. They swung and they missed, and then they tried to put him in prison again and again and again after that too. And so, he owes it to us to be committed to destroying his enemies. He better. and they deserve it, and they broke the law. It's not like he has to cheat and persecute them.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
belong in prison. It's fine. And so all they have to do is their job. And these people are cooked. So I'm not holding my breath, because on that level, it's not law. At that level, it's politics of whether you're going to go that far or whether you're not, as we talked about before. But there ain't no question that they deserve it. And by the way, so speaking of my interview with Taibbi last week, see, I'm so just over promised on too many things. I still have not had a chance to read the newly declassified annex to the Durham report. I have had a chance to review almost all of the newly declassified House Committee investigation of the origin of the ICA. But the great Taibbi went through and he did parse that newly declassified annex to the Durham report with a fine-tooth comb. And he found where essentially it was like this. They said all 17 intelligence agencies agreed, right? Pretending that it was a national intelligence estimate from the National Intelligence Council, which would have included DIA and the State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research and all these others, which of course were not included. That was not true at all. It was, and in fact, they did admit this at the time. It's just the press all lied about it. But at the time, they called it an ICA because it was not an NIE, right? So there was this made up kind of ad hoc intelligence report. And then I'm not sure exactly how quickly it came out that, in Brennan's own words, this was a hand-picked group of people, but we were led to believe from the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA. Well, then it turns out that no, they were all from the CIA. And then it turns out that the CIA analysts objected to each and every single individual piece of so-called evidence or innuendo that was used to support that ICA. And each and every time they were overruled by Brennan. And so that report was just written by Brennan. Yeah. That was it. That was not the agreed upon conclusion of anyone except the leader of Jabhat al-Nusra, the guy that started the war in Ukraine too. That guy.
And the guy who briefed Obama, the previous summer, that Hillary Clinton had an active program going to try to pin all this stuff on Donald Trump. I mean, it's just a total consciousness of what he was doing.
And who we know for a fact actually started the thing himself in December of 2015. And we know for a fact knew that Hillary Clinton was getting on board for what he was doing by March. So we had that report you're referring to as like from the summer. He briefed Obama in the summer, but we know that Brennan knew. I mean, it was his thing in the first place, but we know for a fact that the CIA knew all about what the Russians knew about Hillary's plan to divert attention from her missing emails by saying that Donald Trump was in league with the Kremlin. And this is before any even rumor of the hacked and leaked DNC emails that didn't come until the summertime. So this is at the beginning of the year. It's a total frame-up job, and we don't know exactly when Obama first knew about it. We know he knew at least by July. But we know that John Brennan, who originated the thing, also knew the others' role, particularly the Clinton administration's role. And we know also that the FBI knew all along too. So that means that every single scrap of crap that was brought to the FBI the entire spring and summer of 16, they all knew in advance to expect a deluge of crap from Clinton and her people trying to insinuate some kind of link between Trump and Russia. They all knew. They had all taken the inoculation, and then they went ahead and pretended to be sick anyway. That was the deal.
Yeah, and Obama, I mean, evil
bad analogy
genius,
for this day and age, but you understand what I mean.
Like Obama played it fairly smart. I mean, you notice he never came out and really talked about it. I don't know if he's ever talked about it really. Like he was not one of the guys coming out and saying this is very serious, that blah, blah, blah. Like he didn't give one of those speeches before or after he was in office. And it's almost as if he was doing the Pontius Pilate thing, kind of washing his hands and saying, you guys go ahead and do this. You got my blessing, but don't drag me into this. This is your thing. But, the thing that was so frustrating about it is that even back in 2016, 2017, like as all this stuff was going on, it was so obvious to anybody who would just employ like a fraction of their common sense that this whole thing was ridiculous. I remember when the New York Times published a story. This is just an insane thing. I mean, you think about how stupid this is. The New York Times published a story where anonymous high-level intelligence officials said that they had a source at the Kremlin, a human source at the Kremlin who was in the room when Vladimir Putin gave the order to hack the servers and blah, blah, blah. And right then and there, I'm like, wait a second. Because this is not, they didn't put this information out there in order to like put some indictments down or anything. This is just purely to drive the news cycle for a week. So it's like, wait a second, you're telling me that you have an intelligence source that is in the room with Vladimir Putin when he's giving like the most sensitive order you can imagine. And you're burning that guy like just to like drive the news cycle for a week. Like it's just so stupid that it doesn't even. Or when Mueller when Mueller put those indictments out of a bunch of the Russian intelligence officials and everything, and they talked about how like we have been able to tell like which Russians were at which computer typing what, doing what, all these things, so we know exactly. And here's these indictments. It's like, okay, so you have this unbelievable intelligence source where high-level Russian intelligence officials, you're tracking them on their computers as they're doing the most sensitive stuff they're doing, and you're going to burn that source for some indictments that are never going to go to court. They're in Russia. They're never going to be given up. Like it's just so obviously BS, And like when you couldn't get people who were like, I assume Rachel Maddow has an IQ over, average, and a lot of these people do, that they're not incapable of understanding these things, and it's just how you know that they were all lying. They were lying, and not only lying, but like lying in a way that was like, they were layering emotion on top of their lies to like sell it. Like it's so gross, man.
Well, and this is one of the new developments in there too, is that now it's clear that Jim Comey, when he made that announcement that, okay, the investigation into Hillary Clinton is over and we're not recommending prosecution and all of that, that he did that because he was afraid that the FBI investigation was leading to the Clinton plan to frame Trump, because they were looking into the missing emails. And that was leading right to how they were diverting from it. And when Comey realized that, my own guys are going to figure out what's going on here, that was when he announced the shutdown of the thing. And then I'm trying to remember the exact anecdote that triggered Brennan to call the Russians and tell them, you better knock off whatever you were doing, which only exposed whatever intelligence asset they claimed to have had. I forgot the exact anecdote there, but you could see where it was, and this is in Taibbi's report. You can see where it was essentially intended to prevent the lie from being debunked. Right? They had sources coming in. That was what it was. It was one of the sources that the CIA did rely on, who told them that Putin didn't care who won, and he didn't trust either way. He figured it was going to be bad either way, but he figured that he could handle it, and it wasn't that big of a deal. And then Brennan burned that source because he was debunking the lie.
One of my favorites was when Glenn Simpson, the guy who ran, Fusion GPS, right? When he gave his closed door classified testimony to the Senate Intelligence Committee. And that night, Dianne Feinstein drank too much cold medicine. That was their excuse. And she leaked it. She like published it and sent it out. So it was in the media everywhere the next day. And it's like everybody watching that who like was following the case knew exactly what happened. Is that he went in there and gave some like pretty tight detail like in his story. And they needed this out there so that everybody else could get on the same page, so they didn't come in telling different stories. Everybody knew that's what happened, but they were like, "Oh, she released this highly classified information because she drank too much cold medicine."
Or didn't know that. That's funny.
I mean, all right. I know. I'll let us go. I'm sorry, Chris, our producer. We always keep you longer than the hour, but I remember too when they first formed the special counsel, right? And it's like, I'm not a lawyer, but I know something about, I follow politics enough and have for a long time that I know how special counsels work. Basically, it's when there are political considerations that you need to let the public know that this is an independent, legitimate investigation that's not going to be influenced by all that. And so, what is the number one thing you do not do when you're setting up a special counsel? Well, you don't take the investigators from the FBI who were already working that case and move them over to the special counsel. The whole point of the special counsel is to separate those things.
Yeah.
And so when they start doing things like that, there was just this drumbeat of things where you're like, am I insane? I turn on every channel, and even Fox News, Republican senators on the Senate Intelligence Committee, everybody is like, well, this is very serious. And, we think maybe Adam Schiff is going a little far, but we have to take this very seriously. And it's like, they were all lying, dude. All of them. And this is what's crazy to me too, is that these are the people now that Trump is cozying up to and and hugging and jettisoning his base in favor of. I don't get that at all, but let's wrap this up because I'll keep going. You know me. I've got my dander up now, so we better shut it down.
Dude, I'm obsessed with Russiagate. I can't help it. And just wait until I actually finally do get to lay my own eyeballs on that Durham report annex. I know there's so much in there. There's new stuff coming out. Everybody read Matt Taibbi, racket.news. And Aaron Matei is also doing very great stuff on his Substack and at the Gray Zone and whatever. But listen, before we go, there's one important thing and maybe unimportant. Maybe we just end with something funny here. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but the important thing that I want to talk about was Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which we note every August. And I have this tweet that I put out there, had one of my guys tweet out for me. And I have a blog entry like this at the Libertarian Institute and at antiwar.com. Anybody can find it really easy. Just put my name in there in your search and then search for who opposed nuking Japan. And I've been collecting this list of names for a very long time. And I have this in my book, Hotter Than the Sun. And I have all these quotes.
A bunch of hippies, right? Just a bunch of hippies.
A bunch of commies like MacArthur and Nimitz and Hap Arnold and William Leahy and so in fact, fun anecdote is Tucker Carlson got in big trouble for opposing nuking Japan on the Joe Rogan show. He's like, nuking a city? What the hell is that? And everyone was like, oh my God, you hate America so much. And he was like, geez, I don't know. All I said was it seems weird to nuke a city. I don't know. I really like Tucker, just the way he says stuff sometimes. It just seemed weird to me that we would do something so horrible. I don't even know if that's a direct quote, but probably. Anyway, so he got in such trouble for that. So when I went and did his show, I brought him a printout and I got a little folder and everything for him to put on his shelf and save for safekeeping and in case he ever needs it, like the full printout of my full collection of names here for who opposed nuking Japan. And of course, it begins with Dwight Eisenhower and then is MacArthur and Nimitz, as I said, Hap Arnold and William Leahy and even the Mad Bomber, Curtis LeMay. Said it was completely unnecessary. They all agreed it was completely unnecessary to use the atom bombs on the Japanese. Even Harry Truman had written in his diary, as soon as Stalin declared war on Japan, he wrote, "Finny Japs." He knew that they were in the very last stages of surrendering, and it was not the atom bombs that got them to change their mind. It was the threat of occupation by the communists that got them to surrender to the Americans first. And so it was completely unnecessary. Truman lied from the beginning and claimed that he only nuked military bases when he nuked cities, and including Nagasaki, which was the center of Christianity in Japan. And in fact, dropped a bomb right on the Catholic Church there. Fun anecdote, a bunch of the American Christian missionaries who were there, they survived just by jumping in a ditch. And it kind of showed how these are not really that effective battlefield weapons, but you can definitely kill a city full of civilians with them, They're the Democrats, you know how they are. And anyway, but the point being is this, man, and I think it is really important, especially for people who, are already into this and you like an important talking point or two. This is the kind of thing like we were talking about before about to really change people's mind and get them to admit that maybe things are a little different than they thought before is because just like when Tucker said that on Joe Rogan, people freak out, man. They have a real emotional exception to that because they know that true man would not have done that if he did not have to. And so, as H.W. Bush put it, we would have lost 1 million men invading Japan. Now, they estimated we'd have lost like 30,000. And then later that got embellished to 50,000. And then in the hands of kooks nowadays, it's always 1 million or more than 1 million Americans would have definitely died invading Japan, because we're supposed to just assume that if 2 nukes did it, then full-scale invasion would not get a surrender until they got all the way to Kyoto and put the bayonet through the emperor's throat, right? Like, sure. Anyway, and then also, as though by any measure, it's a fair trade to nuke a city full of women and children whose men are all gone anyway, and nuke a city full of women and children, or, people who are ill fit to fight, elderly or crippled people or whatever, the only men left, and kill all them in trade for GIs. I mean, they're conscripts after all, but still, like, that's not fair. And the whole thing is just crazy and wrong. And Admiral Leahy, who was the 4-star admiral who was the chief of staff to Harry Truman, tried to stop him. And he said his religion, that is Christianity, forbid him from doing things like that. He couldn't stand it. And it was just Truman and evil, what's his name, the Secretary of State. I'm sorry.
Simpson was still...
No. Simpson was the Secretary of War, the skull and bones.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And then the Secretary of State was that asshole. I'm sorry. I always forget his name. But they were the only 3 who were for it. The rest of the entire war cabinet was against it. All the leaders in the Pacific were against it. And 5-star general, leader of United Nations forces in Europe, Dwight David Eisenhower, was against it. Herbert Hoover absolutely denounced it in the bitterest terms over and over again. And the 2 most important founding writers of the conservative movement in the post-war era, Russell Kirk and Richard Weaver, both. So this is an absolute moral abomination. You talk about like what we're doing to Yemen or what we're doing to Gaza now, same thing here. Just because some Democrat commits some horrible war crime doesn't mean we have to all rally around it and identify our own lives with it. It ain't right at all. And the fact that those men said so is really all you need to know. And you know what I mean? Because it couldn't be that, yes, we did have to do it, but that Eisenhower and MacArthur and Nimitz and Arnold and Leahy and LeMay just didn't understand that fact. Right?
Hey, they just
that's impossible.
They weren't hard enough to do the violent, difficult things that men have to do in war.
Yeah, especially that wimp LeMay. What did he know about killing anybody?
The crazy thing about it, too, is like all of the necessity arguments are all based on the idea that it's just obvious that we had to demand an unconditional surrender.
That's right.
It's like, that's not been the European way of war for centuries. Like, that's
and they
not
let him keep their emperor anyway.
Yeah, everything starts with that. And like most of the time, like we didn't fight wars like that for literally for centuries. People, if you would have we win, you lose, we're going to exchange these territories and take, this indemnity from you or whatever. But the idea that there will be no negotiated surrender, you will surrender unconditionally, which means if we want to let our army walk into your young girls' bathrooms and do what they want, whatever, we're the boss. It is unconditional. You have nothing to say. And the people who are demanding this of them have been just firebombing their civilians en masse. I mean, like 100,000 people in one night in Tokyo, and doing this over and over. And they're like, we're going to unconditionally surrender to these people. Like that's, you're putting them in a very difficult situation. They would have negotiated. There's a lot of evidence out there that they would have accepted a reasonable negotiated surrender that was not significantly different than the one that ended up happening in 1944.
Gar Alperovitz is the best historian on that for people who want to look into that. And by the way, Daryl, a guy sent me years ago, he made me give him his solemn promise that I would never share it with anyone. I have it here on my local computer. There's a photograph that his grandfather took of Hiroshima with a panoramic view of the city from the middle of the city in like super high quality. I'll show it to you if you ever come visit here, but he made me promise never to share it with anyone or post it publicly anywhere. But man, it is something else to see, the devastation there. And then wait, back to my real point was that, man, I gotten in real bitter arguments with people about this before. We didn't need to nuke Japan. Like People will fist fight you for saying that. People are really dedicated to how absolutely important and necessary and good that was to do that. They believe that their whole life. Their dad taught them that. Their minister and their coach agree, and that's it. And they're not going to hear it from you. But then you start rattling off all those names, and you know what they say? They say, Eisenhower said that? Leahy said that? Nimitz said that? Nitsa said that? No, that can't be. Yes, it's true. All the Pacific Theater commanders said we didn't have to do this. Hell, the head of the Army Air Corps said we don't have to do it. And then they say, oh my God, I did not know. And I'm sorry I was about to kick your ass for saying that. Like I've been in that discussion a few times. People get upset, but then it's a hard landing, dude. Welcome to the real world where actually I think you'd agree. Like Eisenhower and General MacArthur, if they can agree on this, they know better than you. You actually were wrong up until now when you've changed your mind in favor of them. Isn't that right? Welcome to reality, man. You've been living in Harry Truman's world. Sorry. But then I like things like that because, well, look, if I got that one wrong, then okay, I'm listening. Right? You know what I mean? That's all I'm asking for, man. I don't need you to go ahead and just roll right over, but time to admit that like maybe things aren't so cut and dry. It's just I like flags a lot, and so shut up, boy. You know what I mean? There's more to it. And then to close, I was just going to ask you if it's really worth bringing up or what. I missed it because I'm not on X anymore. I got too many other jobs, but you said that you got in a big fight with the libertarians this week, so I kind of was interested in what that was about.
Next week. We're already at 90 minutes.
Just tell me after the show.
No, well, it'll be it's a good conversation, I think.
Okay.
It'll be an interesting thing to talk about. So, yeah.
All right, bet. All right, well, that's been provoked. Everybody go buy my books at Amazon.com. Here, this is him. Enough already about the Middle East and provoked about the Cold War with Russia there. I need to sell them so that I can make money. And also, I wrote them so that you would know all the things inside them. And then, of course, extremely importantly, William Van Wagenen, Creative Chaos. This guy has put such hard work into this. I mean, literally, he was kidnapped by Al-Qaeda in Syria, and that's not made up. That's a real thing. Like, this guy is a badass. He's one of my best guys at the Institute. This book is brand new out, and there is believe me, dude, I read a lot of books about Syria, 10 or something about the Syrian war. And this is by far the best and the real story of why that whole damn thing was America and our allies' fault, etc.
Dude, you can't buy journalistic street cred like getting kidnapped by Al-Qaeda.
That's exactly right, dude. And yeah, old William Van Wagenen, he don't have to embellish. He speaks very softly. I'll go ahead and speak for him, man. He deserves the credit. He deserves the support and the read for his great journalism. So that's that, Creative Chaos. And that's it for Provoked. And thank you very much, Daryl. And it's good to be with you as always. And we'll see you next week.
Later, everybody.